last session of the Architects Connect talk series. Here we have Naresh Narasimhan, who dons many hats. I and Ethos have many reasons to thank Naresh, and Acedge is one of them, since he is one of the reasons Acedge is. He's well known for his long-term association with Venkataramanan Associates, VA as we know it more popularly, from Bangalore. Some of Naresh's most recent initiatives, I don't think it's really recent, although include Cobalt, a vibrant co-working space. So he could have taken a question or two from Ravi's session as well, I'm sure. In central Bangalore, that uses spatial and social strategies to trigger serendipity at work. Through Metaform, a multidisciplinary conceptual design firm, he has worked with municipal agencies to renew valuable markets and neighborhoods. I've always told Naresh he should stand for mayoral elections. In this talk, he will discuss and elaborate on how robust strategies can frame outcomes. Drawing from his 3-decade-long practice, Naresh will share his insights on how form follows strategy, a manifesto for architects. Over to you, Naresh. All yours.
Okay. Thank you all. Am I audible? Everything clear? All right. See, it's an interesting time. Actually, I've never spent so much time at home for, I think, really too many years now. And it's interesting to, after building a house, that you find different parts of the house that you never went to. And you're finding your own little parts of your, different parts of your house that you've thought of but never really spent time in. So today what I want to do is actually talk to you all about something. I mean, I watched the other two presentations, both what Samip and Vani and Ravi spoke today, about how they are handling it from a point of their own practices, from what concerns them, how do they approach an issue, and how do they convert what are seen as opportunity into an architectural strategy. What I will talk to you today is about the subject that I want to tell you today is about how really form really follows strategy. Form, we've all heard the debate about form follows function, or form follows, or the other way around, or form follows something else. But really, every architect has a strategy, but many architects don't want to admit they do. Right? And it's usually seen as the architects do not like to be seen as businessmen. But strategy is fundamentally a form of doing, getting, and working in business. So you don't really want to be seen as that, but all of us have something which is unique to almost every architectural firm, how they get the work, and how do they do the work, and how do they rationalize what they do, right? So typically what happens is, as you all have noticed now, Ravi also mentioned in the end of his presentation that we all went crazy. I also run a large practice with more than 150 people working on computers. And we also did all this stuff. We unfortunately have a server-centric strategy in which almost all our the computers are terminals, powerful terminals, but terminals still the same. And we have a strategy in which we have a powerful server-based system which serves both the software, and also the output is stored back in a server. So there's no option to move all the computers to people's homes. There was no point doing that really. So what we did instead was to actually do the other way around. We created an array system within the office, which is a server-based system which serves you the software as you log on to it. It actually works out much better and cheaper, because you notice that most people are not on the software most of the time, and they're doing other kinds of things. That some of them are working on, they're not, when I say not on software, I mean not on AutoCAD or Revit, which are the two design softwares, or 3D Max for their instance that we use. But there is a diversity, just like when you design for power in a building, you don't design for 100% load, you only design for 70 or 80% of peak load. So similarly, we also find that when we do it, we've noticed that only 60-70% of the people are on the software at one time. So it actually works out that you save a little money on, we don't need to buy all the license, we don't need to buy 100% of the licenses. The license is served when you log into the software itself, right? So let me just get started with this, right? We all need commissions to survive, and the most overlooked truth of our profession is that in order to win commission, we must operate in the market for what I call intangible goods. We're not selling fruits and vegetables. Fundamentally, we're selling something, or rather marketing something, or we want to use a more polite word, we're trying to convince clients of a good or goods that still does not exist. So you're selling an intangible good. So that's why I want to say how strategy shapes your intent rather than anything else. Hello, 1 second. It's not working. Probably one of the most interesting architects to emerge in the last 15-20 years is the practice of Bjarke Ingels, who came up with the great slogan saying yes is more, and whose company brochure is actually a comic. He does not, normally all of architects are very impressed to, they always want to call their company material a monograph, or they want to produce a real artistic looking book. He took the exact opposite position, and he actually created a comic book out of his practice, which you can see in a page of it on the right. And this guy, he started his life, of course, working with the ultimate marketer of them all, who contradicts himself, Mr. Rem Koolhaas, who contradicts himself in buildings as well as in print very often, but still manages to get his way. But what Bjarke does is, actually, I went to their office in Copenhagen a couple of years back, and there were about 100 people in that office at that time, and 25 to 30 of them were only doing publicity and marketing. Now, normally we have 1 or 2 guys in the office, even now architects do not understand the power of social media very well. And we normally outsource it maybe, or we have some young kid in the office who he knows Facebook and he knows Instagram, who keeps posting something on social media. Big has the exact reverse strategy. 1/4 of their entire organization is devoted to doing only that. And probably one of the reasons for their great success is their grasp and capability and understanding of how social media influences both the creation of design as well as the getting of the work, and most importantly, how they attract new talent to come and work for them. Right? The only people who have understood that in India really are, I find that some of the younger interior designers who use Instagram as a marketing tool rather than a web page. And most of them don't even have a web page anymore. Most of them are using Instagram to showcase their work to the world. Right? So, right. So, architects somehow delight in making their world a mysterious world. They don't really, they want to make it unattainable by ordinary people. I cannot understand why. Right? When we follow a artistic performer or an artist or even a fashion designer, they do the exact reverse. They try to make it much more accessible to you, and make it more and more open and make you understand what they do, and they somehow give a peek into what they do. But architects don't do that. We somehow have a bit of a, I think, intellectual arrogance and a little bit of an ivory tower, saying that we know what we're doing. You should try and understand us, rather than we will not really try and explain it to you what exactly we do. And that came across in both and some other presentations that I saw, saying that we won't tell the client everything. We try to, we have our own stealth agendas we will execute, because the client is capable of misunderstanding us. I feel somehow that's a wrong way to do it. You should actually architects should be able to talk about what they do much more easily and be able to communicate in normal language. Just like I always tell, the best scientist that I meet is somebody who can explain quantum physics to me in normal English. Right? Architects should be like that. rather than start drawing equations on the board, which you lose interest immediately, right? So at the same time, many other architects do the exact opposite, and they behave like the client, they behave like the builder or the developer, and they behave like the environmental consultant and start talking about how energy efficient the building is, or what do you call it, how efficient the carpet area to super built area is, or so on and so forth. But you have to understand that architects are fun. If you position yourself as an intellectual, right, and who knows how to talk about what they do, and abandon the fact that you're actually building an object, and you understand that you start making discourse about what you do rather than what you do itself, about what the output of the end product is, right? I didn't say that, Mark Wigley said that, and it's an important point to make, that you should know how to, one of the things that architects don't do is they do not know how to communicate. They know how to communicate to each other, to their peer groups. You know, whenever I go to a presentation about where many architects are there, they're all talking to each other. But when you use the same language to a client, the client loses the plot within the first 10 seconds if you don't talk their language. I'm not saying you should talk like a builder. You should know how to talk about what you do in a normal way, right? So there are four aspects, right, of anything. A building fundamentally reflects these three things. There is a technical feasibility to it, or maybe a FSI or whatever, FAR or whatever it is. There is a human feasibility to it, saying what is the desirability component of it, and three, what is the viability of it, whether it's possible to do it, whether it's required, whether the form that you're thinking of meets a budget, or does it meet a timeline, etc., right? And does your strategy for selling the building, selling the design, correlate with the design strategy that you're using? Because design strategy might make a lot of sense to all of you, to yourself, but does the way you put it across to the client, does it also have a strategy? Right? Many architects usually forget about that, and you have to ask this question, saying, does the design inform your sales strategy, or the sales strategy inform the design strategy? You have to be sure which is the right approach for when you go to a client, right? So what are the strategies that many architects use, right? Let's go through one by one, right? So there is a Chinese proverb which says that when the winds of change blow, like they're doing right now, right, some people build walls and other people build windmills. Which one are you going to be, right? So you have to understand that unless you build windmills, you cannot really go ahead, particularly in a time like this when we are all wondering what is the future of this profession itself. Okay, so let's look at what each one does, right? Let's look at marketing. So everybody has forgotten about this guy. He was the one who invented, before him, this guy called Charles Luckman, and he was the guy who was the original Steve Jobs, who knew how to package something perfectly, right? And very few architects have appeared on the cover of Time magazine. I know there were just about 3 or 4, and this guy is one of them. And this was long ago in the 1950s, post the World War, where he started saying that architecture alone, as an ivory tower, the most architects think that Howard Rourke is their goal, guy who sits in the ivory tower, doesn't listen to anybody, and just dishes out whatever he wants, and the client better take it or stuff it. If he doesn't like it, bad luck kind of thing, but he still has to build it. But Luckman understood the fundamental nature of architecture as to how to treat it as not as a service, but as a product. And he was the guy who came up with the design for this building everybody knows, right? He was the architect of Lever House, which is in New York, which is actually the first building where a sales strategy of how to lease this building out and how to sell modernity as an aspirational goal was actually used in. Is there a problem? Something it said stop something. Sonam?
No problem at all.
All right.
Fine, yeah.
Right. And his key talent was actually his power of persuasion, right? And you know, there are many guys like Cedric Paste and so on and so forth. And for first 20 years of his life, he sold toothpaste for Procter and Gamble. Right? There's something wrong, Sonam. I can hear somebody else talking continuously in Tamil.
Yes, we noted someone just unmuted themselves, so I've put them on mute again.
Okay, all right.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, so his key talent was this, so he's a very interesting character. He spent first 20 years of his life, he actually spent as a marketing manager for Procter and Gamble, selling toothpaste and soap. And then he switched to doing this, building architecture. And it's still an unusual building in New York City, still a successful building which is functional even today. Right? Then he started understanding how to, and there was another architect at that time called William Pereira. Again, a lot of us have forgotten about these guys in the 50s. We only are seeing in India, most architectural students or architects, when you ask them who do they know, there are only 2-3 names will come up. Either it's Cobb or it's Frank Lloyd Wright or it's a Mies van der Rohe. Nobody else knows anybody else. Nobody has understood what is the history of modern American architecture or modern architecture of large scale modern architecture. So, yeah, so Liver House itself, the last building that I showed, this one, it's like a Liver House. It's all of you know Hindustan Liver, the parent company is Liver. And he said the continuing cleanliness, because they were the world's largest manufacturer of soap and detergent, the strategy used to sell to them was the glass frame of the building and the stainless steel mullions of the building can be kept clean and free from grime, and have been. And it's like a deliberately showcasing their own product. He actually sold it to them like that. It's an unusual way of approaching a design. And he also started looking at, at that time, the rise of television and prompted a new building typology, that of production studios for television programs, right? And he was one of the guys who came up with how to do it, how to come up with brand new typologies. It's in some sense, I started following this chap and we started noticing that we, as a Venkataramanan Associates, VA, we started getting a lot of projects in which we had no experience beforehand. And we only got them through the power of persuasion. And I started wondering who could do that and how do you create new typologies. In India, what happens is that we are very good at following tradition. We always follow tradition, but we never think that somebody started the tradition at some point in our history. And we do not understand that it is also a job of an architect to create new traditions in life and create new ways to look at typology, look at new needs, also reinvent old new. For instance, right now, the biggest trend right now by India and Indian architecture in terms of commissions is that of these co-living spaces. What are co-living spaces? They're basically hostels, what we used to call hostels. It's nicely been rebranded as co-living. Unfortunately, we didn't think of that. Some marketing guy thought of that, and now that's become a big hit. Just like business centers were rebranded as co-working spaces, now hostels are being rebranded as co-living spaces, right? Etc. So these two guys, they also came also at that time that there was a big push of the World Space Program, the push into space. And they also found that as an interesting, they were these two guys, Lokman and Pereira, were practiced together, and they would split up. At some point they split up, but see, because they slightly differed on their way and on their marketing strategy and as well as their design strategy. But they came up with these new ways of inventing new typologies itself, right? And they became very famous. You can see Lokman there, along with the handsome-looking Mr. Willem Pereira, meeting Eisenhower, and they reached the president of them met them itself, right? Right. The second way of doing work, of marketing work, is to, the whole idea of architecture as a symbol, where probably nothing emphasizes this more than the Guggenheim in Bilbao, where a building project created by Frank Gehry actually completely created and revitalized the architecture of a new city. Sorry. Created, and Bilbao was a dying industrial city which nobody would go to, and it was falling apart. And when the Guggenheim finally suddenly decided to create this new museum, this one building created a brand new economy for the city itself, and also created huge amount of using tourism as a driver, also created a metro, created infrastructure, created hundreds of new jobs, and actually brought back, nobody had heard of this town called Bilbao till Frank Gehry built this building. So this is another way to architects can change the world itself, right? This is William Pereira's probably most famous building, the in La Jolla in California, and the building as an icon. We were all used to clients saying, "I want an iconic building." So this is the guy who, this was the first iconic building, really, in 1970. He created this building, which became an icon for the University of that La Jolla itself, right? An unusual this thing. Okay, and almost like a metaphor of it's a library building for a university. It's like a building upholding knowledge itself, kind of. It's a marketing strategy as a concept, no? Right? And you will also see now. And he also, where William Pereira was very clear that there was no need for him, that whole idea of a continuing over, that architects have to show that there's a continuing style in what they do. He dumped that idea, and he said that his was an architecture of no formal continuity, and every time he came up with a new commission, the response to it would be contextual, and whatever the client would influence it a lot. Sorry, 1 second. Yeah. Right. So he was also the architect of the Trans-America Tower. The idea of making a skyscraper which represents the city itself, the image of the city itself. He was the first guy who came up with it, right? Of course, you can see the transition in that all the way down to the building at the bottom left, this one, of BRK Ingalls doing the via apartment building. And this is an unusual building, unusual shaped building in the skyline on the coast of Manhattan in New York. You can see Central Park behind. And why it was done like this was that it's a simple real estate strategy. Everything, we all know, lake facing, sea facing, swimming pool facing gets more money, right? From when a developer markets it. So, but the frontage of the site was very limited, as you can see there. So what he did was increase the frontage of the site by sloping it backwards, right? If you had made a regular building like any other building, only the apartments on the facing the Hudson River would have got a premium, and everything else would have been priced lower. So he created this incredible idea where he just bent the building backwards with the air rights, and he also created this courtyard. So not only do the apartments on the front get a view, the one on the inside of the courtyard also, the units there, they also get a view of the front. So typically something like 75% of the building apartments in that building would got a view of the bay, of the river, and obviously would be priced more. And also makes an unusual typological change in the way an apartment building is conceived in New York itself. Right? Right? So in the words of BRK Ingalls itself, he says, I quote from BRK, he says from his website, he says, "We try to make it easy and intuitive to understand why it is like it is and why it is interesting." So I think that's probably not a style. It's more like a discipline towards being able to communicate ideas. See the way he puts it across. Right? Right. Now, there is another set of architects who have gone beyond making buildings and projects, and who are, in India, cities are built by a nexus of transport planners, by bureaucrats, and sometimes some politicians. Architects have almost very little role to play, though there have been some attempts by Charles Correa and others to be able to influence the city, the idea of a city. Very little has actually happened on the ground, and mostly I think cities are built by guys who want to build flyovers and by developers who want to develop outlying areas. But in the West, that is not true. Architects have started becoming more and more influential in the idea of who creates the city for the future. And this is most important is this guy called Ricky Burdett, who works in the as a division of the it's called the Urban Age program of the London School of Economics, where he says his point is that architects shape cities by making buildings. Politicians make policy. Getting them to talk to each other is what interests me, is what Ricky says. And he has created this whole idea of a city laboratory, the idea of how to create not only the ecology from what you talk about nature, but also the ecology of the political system. How do architects play a part in that? Right? So he's created this thing. This is a fantastic website. I don't know how many of you have seen it, right? And he has this terrific lines where he says, unless they want to wipe themselves out and become only aesthetes, have to deal with larger issues, the big issues of the city, right? Whether it's health or well-being of the entire city, not just of the buildings that they do itself. This is another way to look at it, right? At the same time, one second, screen is. There are many other architects like Alfredo Brillenberg and many other. One second, I'm sorry. And there are many others who have also caught on to this, who influence the making of public spaces and the idea of reinventing typologies of these kind of spaces which we take for granted. Particularly Alfredo Brillenberg and Hubert are involved in many, like in their own words again, they have said that, right, by researching in city economy, spaces and politics, we come up with innovative solutions for city living. They sell their services to municipalities, government bodies and international as key to influencing city development and social equity and equality. Again, sorry, the computers, right. There's another bunch of architects who decide that, it's too much trouble to collect fees and talk to clients and, all the time put up with compromise. They see catering to clients as a compromise, and they decide to become their own developer. They particularly in the interior design space, I see this more and more as a design build. Okay. One of the minor advantages of this is that they also make a lot more money than architects who do just a design practice. But many of them, this is very common in the West now, and it's becoming very common in India now, both as architect who becomes the developer of the project, because who is what I call designer-led design build kind of model. And one of the most important examples, prominent examples, is a company in Bangalore headed by an architect called Kamal Sagar, who company called Total Environment, who produces what he thinks is good design. And he's a good designer himself. And he has a very unusual kind of apartment block. As you can see, this is probably a photograph of a living room taken at the 10th floor. And he feels that apartments and housing should be designed as though they were all at ground level. And he always has this idea of a landscape terrace outside his prominent living spaces. And his projects are very unusual. This strategy, what he has done is, because of this strategy, his projects are always 20 to 30% more expensive, priced more expensive than any other developer in the city. And he gets his market. He gets the people, he almost has to use probably a wrong word in this time, a very viral effect on every client of his brings in another client. in a very viral sort of marketing way. It's an unusual client, right? Right. Of course. Then you have the great Einsteins, the #1 architects in the world, who make their own rules, and you go to them and you don't go and tell them what they want, right? And they do what they think is good for you, and the client is welcome to buy it, or if he doesn't like it, he can lump it. And we have great examples like Rem Koolhaas or Frank Gehry, who do exactly what they feel like, or even Zaha Hadid for that matter. They do what they want, and if the client likes that, they can come to them. They are not going to do what the client wants, right? And Rem Koolhaas in particular, he takes functionality to its radical extreme, and in the sense that what I would think of Koolhaas is that he, of all people, has realized that concepts have an inherent value independent of a built structure. And for that, his firm is called OMA, Office for Metropolitan Architecture, and he has got a research tank called AMO, right? And which sometimes produces research which actually contradicts what the primary architectural firm does. But he's able to hold two opposing ideas in his head at the same time, and convince the client that what he's doing is the right thing, which is an unusual gift. Right? You also find that, right? You also find that, one second, right? He also finds that there are many architects who, for instance, this is the Apple store in New York City, which is probably the most minimalist storefront. The entire store is below the ground, right? This is done by a firm in Seattle, and you will find that that is enough as an icon to tell you how architecture as used as a marketing element is enough to convey the idea of a product. Right? So, what are the archetypes of what do you call it? What are the archetypes of architects themselves? Right? Of course, what I call the Einsteins, which means they have their very original idea, and as I said, you can go to them if you like what they do. They are not going to do what they want you to do. They are not interested in your ideas of the client's ideas of functionality, or whether the client wants this or that. If you go to them, tell them about a budget, they'll probably show you the door. But still, they get their work because they're unusually talented people. Right? Then you have what I call the niche experts, guys who know how to do, say, football stadiums, cricket stadiums, or maybe some specialist buildings, etc., etc. Right? Or maybe a convention center. There are many firms like this in the world. There are even firms in the world which are even more specialized. There is a firm in the US called WET, W-E-T, who only deals with water in a building site. Unusual company, right? And what the niche experts do is they carefully watch the Einstein architects, as they call them, and they make sure that they adapt. For instance, they'll watch what Herzog de Meuron does as a stadium for the Olympics in China, and these firms will quickly adapt something like that in a little more functional way to create much different kinds. There is a whole lot of examples of firms like this working in Qatar for the FIFA World Cup hopefully later this year. Right? Then you have, of course, the market partners, as I call them. There are many architects like this in India. One of them is very visible in the middle of the picture there. I don't have to tell you who he is, right? Who know how to what do you call it? Convince both politicians as well as businessmen, and to such an extent that the use of their name, they allow their own names to be used as part of the marketing material of the project, and that actually adds a premium to the value of the project. In this presentation, I'm not really going to focus on whether the architecture they do is of aesthetic quality or not, or I'm not commenting on what they do as a output, but more as how they use strategy to gain work. Right? So this is one of the projects done by Hafiz in Bangalore. And what I would call that for instance, till this point, Infosys was building buildings like a IIT campus, very understated, very down to earth, very cost effective, very climate sensitive and all that. Suddenly they realized that Infosys realized that they need to, once they started hit $1 billion in market value, they decided that they need to be known in the world. So what I call, they needed a building as photo op, to be able to stand in front of it and to take a photograph, and so that the clients in America think that their work that they're outsourcing to a client, to a firm in India, has a building as inverted commas modern or futuristic as they projected themselves to be able to service an American market. So this was what I call building as photo opportunity. And this firm is very good at doing things like that in a very market partnership kind of way, right? Then of course you have the community leaders, a building which to my great regret was demolished a couple of years back, who together with the community, together with their community of both, say, create projects which are meant to serve the community itself. This is Raj Reval's building, unfortunately no longer exists, right? And there are more archetypes in this, what I call the efficiency experts. The largest firm in the world is a firm called Gensler, or Gensler, I think you pronounce it Gensler. And the photograph, I'm sorry, the face got a little obscured. And what I call, who emphasize that they are the most efficient architects in the world, right? You give them an X budget and an X program, they will usually come in below that and make the client, they never lose a client. And they're also very good at delivering work once they are given a commission. And Gensler is now the world's largest firm with fee billings in excess of $1 billion a year. That's close to 7,500 crore of fees, and about 30 offices all over the planet, including that they have a 150-person office in Bangalore, which is mostly doing outsourced work, but now starting to expand into the Indian market. They're clearly the world's largest firm, particularly in interior design practice, all over the world. They're there in almost more than 100 and odd countries in the planet. Right? Then we have what are the new form of development that has come now, what I call one small thing I forgot to tell you about Gensler. If you read his book, he's published a book on what his design philosophy and how his firm philosophy is. And he says that he does not like to see his work to reduce to a construction of buildings. Instead of signing clients with contracts with his clients as a contractor, his strategy is more like an advertising strategy. He opens accounts with them and advises them in the decision making, whether it concerns the necessity of the building itself, an optimization of their business, or the hiring of a major contractor. He becomes effectively part of the client's advisory and management team. And Ravi Sarangan also spoke about what they do as programming. This is programming carried to an ultimate level. He compiles data on the building site, its efficiency of the building, and he can anticipate the probable success or failure of an idea. Managers of firms across all levels seek him out for his opinion, right? And so he becomes part of the strategic decision making of the client itself. So that's another way to approach practice. This is another thing where what happens is that many smaller firms want the opportunity to do larger work, but they're not willing to commit to increasing the size of their overhead and increasing the size of their practice. So what I call them, so what they do is they do informal and formal arrangements with a bunch of other companies which have discrete yet exclusive skills, and together they become exhaustive in the eyes of a client. And this is an unusual studio called Assemble in England, right? Which is a combination of 16 practices, 16 architects, right? And every one of them is a principal architect, and they have come up with a sort of set of core values and a democratic way of functioning, which is what I call, they probably are the first collective architectural practice in the world to actually get grants from what I would, one second, right? They get from prominent, they get art and art grants as well as building grants from prominent funding agencies, and they're able to do experimental projects that the rest of us are not able to do. The project that you see here is actually an abandoned petrol bunk in the middle of London, right? And that's why it's called the Cineroleum. It's a petroleum bunk, which has been converted to a temporary cinema, which is funded by an arts grant, right? It's an unusual way to approach a practice, right? And there are, in the UK, apparently there are 4,000 plus abandoned petrol bunks, which nobody needs anymore. And they are coming up with ideas how to reuse them instead of tearing them down, right? Then, of course, this is, everybody is wondering when we are going to get to my own firm. We tend to be, Venkataramanan Associates tend to be more like what we call, we tend to conduct a large orchestra. We have a, we are like the conductor of a very large, we do fairly large projects in which we work with multiple stakeholders, not only the client being one of them, of course, but we also work with funding agencies, we work with other architectural firms, maybe master planning firms. This is a project that I showed you here, is it's about a 6 million square foot project in Bangalore, which is probably the most mixed use project you can ever see. The building on the left, it has an office building, it has housing, it has a large mall, it has a 5-star hotel, it has a hospital, it has a school, it has a club, and then some. It's a very mixed use project. And there are actually other architects who have done small bits of it, as well as the master planning. We have worked with an international firm. We actually worked with a special firm only to handle car parking. It has more than 6,000 car parking spaces underneath, and a special landscape firm. In the end, we had about 24 people, and we were the guys who were conducting the orchestra, saying, now the violin start now, and the bass starts now, the drums keep quiet now, kind of thing. And we finally pull off a project in a large scale collaborative model where we still control the design intent and output of the project. I'll end now in about 2 more minutes, right? So what are the strategic systems architects should use? There are basically three fundamental things, right? One, you have, how do you get work? What is the clients that you want? You must learn to choose your own clients rather than let the clients choose you, right? What is the image and message that you want to promote as a company? How do you promote your firm? How do you price your services? And what geographies do you want to work in? You have to make the decision. And then again, what types of project that you want to do? How can you should start developing deep expertise in a few project types which interest you a lot. What are you going to do about project management? Are you going to do in-house, or are you going to do an outsourced model? So based on that, your staffing mix will change. And what is the learning organization that you put into your own practice? How does your own firm learn? In India, still we think that if we go to college and come out, that's the end of our learning. We don't think it's important to continue learning as we go along. And then how do you organize the work is, what is the leadership of the company? And that should be distinguished from the ownership of the company. How is the firm structured? And how is, what is your sense of profitability? And what are the information systems and management systems that you put inside to make sure that you're delivering a good quality product, both in terms of data and output every single time, right? So if you break this up into a 4-graph matrix, you have 4 kinds of firms fundamentally in the working in the world. What I call, one is the design-driven designers, who, as I said, they are the Einsteins of the world. You don't tell them what you want, you go to them and they will tell you what you want, right? And in many of them, when I put a graph like this, the graph also reflects the relative position of the dots, reflects the size of the practice, right? People don't realize that Zaha Hadid is a 350-person size architectural firm now headed by Michael Schumacher. and OMA is is a little smaller than that, but big is starting to catch up even more, but they're going more down what I call, if you two graphs, if you take design on top and business on the other axis, you will find that business driven design firms, you have many firms like HOK, Gensler, of course, is the top of the pack on the top right. Probably sitting here, it's visible there. And probably a prominent Indian example is some firm like RSP Architects out of Bangalore, or maybe even Hafiz Contractors out of Bombay. And you will find a third type of design where we call a design driven business strategy, that we are very clear. And I think Ravi Sarangan also fits in this model, the edifice consultants. We are definitely here. And there are firms like Morphogenesis, and probably the outlier in the pack is Foster and Partners. And people don't realize, again, Renzo Piano is a very large practice based out of Italy. And of course, the firms that we all love to hate, all architects. And you'll find that now a lot of these, why I've put Cushman and Wakefield there is, many of the project management firms have now realized that why are they allowing architects to be the first contact with the client. Many of them are hiring architects and pitching design services to the clients directly, right? And the largest in this game is the world's largest firm, which is a multidisciplinary firm. Gensler is the world's largest architectural firm, practice firm, but the world's largest firm is a company called AECOM, which is something like about 20,000 crore in turnover or something like that, and some 6 or 7, no, even more than that. They just acquired their second biggest competitor, a firm called URS, which now makes them close to about $20 billion in turnover. Right. Charles Correa always, one of my great heroes, he always got it right. He said that we should never look at architecture as only consisting of physical attributes. It's a many layered thing, and architects have definitely a role to play in in sort of influencing how society and cities are shaped. Particularly now with this post-pandemic story, I think more architects should get involved in how cities are planned and how they should be designed. Okay. A little bit of background of what we do as Venkataramanan Associates. Right? This was an early project of ours where done by my father, Mr. P.K. Venkataramanan, a beautiful building, a library for the Raman Institute in Bangalore, done in exposed concrete. The photograph is a few years old. The building looks as fresh and beautiful as the day it was built. The unusual part of this building was it is set in a grove of eucalyptus trees, and the concrete, he spent about 2-3 months. Ravi also mentioned that you experimenting with the color of concrete so that it matches the color of the eucalyptus trees precisely. And so it looks like part of the landscape even today. Right? We do a lot of large scale housing like this. We've also done we have a very diverse practice. We are about like 8 separate practices working in one office. This is the National Gallery of Modern Art in Bangalore. It's both a restoration and as well as a new building, which you can see on the right. Right? We also do strange projects which mostly engineering firms do. This is a car factory for Volkswagen, and it's probably one of the most unusual projects we have done, where we did not realize why we got the job, but once we got it, it was a fascinating project involving robotic manufacturing. This is a recent project of ours for, we are experts in buildings for science and technology and research and development, and this is for Lupin Laboratories in Pune. A very nicely done project, very well finished and very well integrated with. All the landscape is only consists of trees and plants from which are local flora and fauna, which has caught on very well in that harsh lateritic soil there. Right? This is a large project that we have done in Bombay and still continuing for Nirlon. It's one of the old textile mills of Bombay, which is in North Bombay and Goregaon. And this is about a 5 million square foot development which has been going on for the past 10 years. And the final building, which is about ground plus 34 floors, is now coming up behind this building on the left. This is an unusual project for Bajaj. It's called the Future of Bajaj. It's an old auto rickshaw manufacturing factory. For us, we've got about more than 20 building, 25 projects, I think, which are LEED and Griha certified, both in platinum. But the greenest building in the world is a building that's already built. When Bajaj asked us to do this, they wanted to demolish this factory and make a laboratory. But we said, don't do that. And we had fantastic north light trusses, and we reused this entire project. And we just added a floor in between for meeting rooms, but the rest of it is just left as it is, and completely cleaned up and made into a office space for the design, the future of design, of the design center for the future of Bajaj Auto. Right. So that's it as far as our firm is concerned. So there are 3 levels when architectural firms brand themselves. One is called, the level 1 is many architects feel branding is unnecessary for architecture. Level 2 is that when they suddenly realize that it may be important and start doing PR, appointing a PR agency, and start doing social media and so on and so forth. And level 3 is when you hit the level of what I call Bjarke Ingels and the others. Then they find out that brand and architecture, brand is actually a word which comes from putting a hot metal symbol on the back of animals to prove that you own them. And what they realize is that architecture and branding is actually the same thing. And your building is as good, your brand is as good as the last project that you made for somebody else. And once you realize that it is one thing, then you realize that what kind of, what your firm strategy should be. Now, I'll show you some examples like how architecture, lighting and branding are merging into, this building is actually called Sexy Tower in Guangzhou, where the architect has sold it as in the shape of a female form and called it Sexy Tower. And it actually gets done, and the entire building is a LED LED skin over the whole building. Right? And you'll find this as the Harbin Opera House. This has been reviled a lot for its so-called sexual imagery, but again done by mad architects, where architecture and branding becomes one. When you see this, you know who has done it. You don't have to explain. This is a project that we did for the Valley School. This is done by Venkataramanan Associates by my partner, Aparna, here. And which is a project where we decided that she has decided not to use technology and to use the old idea of hand sketches and using WhatsApp as a fantastic tool to communicate back and forth to the site, and come up with a project which is completely integrated with the landscape. And many architects use this saying, we had a wooded site, we removed only 4 or 5 trees. The fundamental part of this project is removed no trees. How do you do that? And they always say best time to plant a tree was yesterday. And in this particular case, that's particularly important, right? As a firm, we are also involved a lot with city level initiatives. Venkataramanan Associates, we also have a CSR component of a company called the Mod Institute, mod.org.in, for those of you who are interested. We keep proposing a lot of projects to the city of Bangalore. This is a river in Bangalore which is actually full of sewage, and we have now proposed a mitigation strategy using reed beds and an ecological sensitive thing to restore this river back to its normal, to its original state. We also, this is the old gateway of the city of Bangalore, which was demolished a few years ago. We have proposed this again in the same spot as a in topiary, in landscape, in an amateur way in which you grow plants instead of building a building with brick and mortar, right? And all of you know that there is this, the funny part of this whole debate, for instance, about the Central Vista project, it's a highly controversial project coming up in Delhi now, done by an Ahmedabad-based firm, is that the main topic of conversation in this is how much does it cost? Which I find is a ridiculous way to be able to engage with something which is part of a national memory. Everybody only worried about 20,000 crores or 30,000 crores. Nobody worried about what it's going to do to the idea of collective memory itself, right? So the Indian reality is that in another 15, 20 years, we are going to get 600 million people, 560 million people are already living in the city, and it's going to double, right? How are architects going to be part of dealing with this problem. And by the way, that's not a photograph of India when all the diyas were lit the day before yesterday night. This is actually a photograph of India showing its electricity distribution. Right? So 300 more million people will live in cities. That sounds like a fancy number. When you realize that 1 million people, 10 lakh people will move into cities every month. Hopefully, because of this pandemic, things will slow down a bit and architects will learn to go to tier 2 and tier 3 towns and learn to make them more livable. Right? There are many plans to upgrade Indian cities, and which only sees architecture as a problem-solving problem. And in none of these architects are involved at all. Right? They're completely absent. Right? And there have been many fanciful ideas of how architects, they're in the West particularly, how, these are all look like futuristic visions, but, in today's pandemic world, this could actually become the reality. Right? We were involved in a small project in Bangalore where we had given a street in the shopping street in the middle of the city. We noticed the Starbucks sign and the before and after. You'll note you can't smell the slide, but the street was a stinking street with broken sewers, and we converted it into a walking street in Bangalore about 2 years ago. And you have to learn to work together with municipalities. And this was the state of the street when we dug it. What you see on the left is electricity, water, sewage, and the blue pipe is the information superhighway of Bangalore. And the sewage is flowing nicely below it in an open drain. We actually had to rip this whole thing apart and redesign a street where put it into ducts and make sure everything is separated out. The street never has to be dug again for the next 50 years, or at least hopefully till the top layer lasts. And that's what it looks like when it was done. And very clear thresholds, very clear idea of footpaths, very clear idea of, and also the pattern used there is a Kasuti pattern from Karnataka embroidery. Okay, I'll almost end here, saying that you have to learn to live in a world where you are in a perpetual conflict of interest. Unless you form, it's an improvised world of contest and compromise that no one person can control. The moment you understand this, you can start working with cities. And this is a great book, by the way, if any of you have not read it. It's one senior architect's idea of how, his journey through how, and I found this quote is a fantastic quote from that book. Right? So we also do a lot of programs in the city where we try to imagine the future of the city using popular comics and exhibitions. And in the words of Buckminster Fuller, you can only think of the future by designing it. And when you envision and execute what we think is modern ideas of prefab, this is Habitat in 1967 by Moshe Safdie in Montreal, and where these kind of ideas still have not come into India yet, right? And how we can use art and illustration, as I said, but from our own art, from our own culture, to be able to convert them into modern concepts of buildings, right? Where the idea of an ashram can be brought into a school, the Valley School on the right. The idea of how to use Patachitra, the idea of landscape and form maps being merged, where it shows people as part of life rather than completely separated out. Right? And I would end here by saying that a designer is always an emerging synthesis of an artist and a mechanic, an economist, and an evolutionary strategist. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Architect Naresh. That was an inspiration. Your anecdotes, the lessons from your travels, your views on practices and their strategies. This is really a wonderful exchange of ideas, systems, and processes. And the questions that we see in the chat box, it has for sure given a lot of food for thought to many of them.
How do I see the chat box?
So at the bottom of the bar, you have this option on Zoom, you have this option which says chat. But if you look at it while I'm reading it, then you may get distracted. So just sit back, relax as we do the moderation. All right?
Please stop sharing so he'll be on screen, Sonam.
Yes.
I got it.
Naresh, you can stop sharing your PPT so you'll be.
How do I do that?
I've done it for you. I've done it for you.
Yeah. Excellent. This is not as intuitive as all that, this software. Huh.
So our first question to you. Yes, Geeta?
You're an old man, Naresh, I said. Yeah, carry on, Sonam.
Yeah. So our first question to you, Architect Naresh, I think your screen is has frozen. Are you here with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. Okay, great.
I've just muted the. So I've just muted the screen. That's all.
Okay, paused it for sure, no problem. Do you want to start it again? Because then we'll not be able to see you when you speak.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm here. Go ahead. What do you want me to do?
Sonam, you are stuck now. You're frozen. Rama, take over, please, till Sonam comes back.
Yes. So we'll go to the questions. So to begin with, I had a question personally, Architect Naresh. Thank you for the amazing, stimulating presentation, I must say. When we talk about architecture as symbol, although this is a very deep level of conceptualizing that we need to think about, there are a lot of projects that come up with these very hollow concepts of selling their idea. Concepts which are borrowed from other contexts for printing on their brochures without really, having any relation to their present context. Like housing townships, for example, are marketing themselves with concepts like Spanish themes and Greek themes, etc. And many clients are also dazzled by these. So how can this hollow approach in developing a brand for the project be perceived as or even dealt with?
Well, it's difficult to comment about that. I mean, it's like, that's what they say, no? It's a too bad common sense isn't common. So if you get a lot of clients who want this and that and whatnot, and if you are going to just do what they want, then I said, then what is the point of being an architect? You should have the capability to stick to your own commitment and your own ideas and say that, be able to sell that story properly to clients. That's what I've been saying the whole past 1 hour, saying that if you start behaving like a chameleon of the client, then who are you? If you have to learn to be an intellectual, then behave like one. And if there is no, what do you call it, dearth of bad taste in the world, if the guy wants something like that, then say that I don't do that for a living. And architecture is a calling. If you want to do that kind of thing, you may as well become a developer yourself, no? And do whatever you think that is more market oriented. You can't really control what people want. If somebody says, I like Greek pediments all over the place, that's their problem. That's what can you do about it? You can try to convince them, saying, don't do that. Let's do something more sensible, more contextual, more local, more interesting. But if they don't listen, then you can't do much about it. And to be completely, frank, earlier in my career also, I've had these choices, and sometimes, mea culpa, as they say, I've also made the wrong choices a couple of times. And quickly I realized that this is a pretty stupid thing to do, and I never did it again.
Thank you so much. So I think we'll move on to our next question, which is by Sharat, and he wants to understand how marketing and branding can be learned right from the academic level. Sharat, can you unmute yourself and ask the question yourself?
Hello.
Yeah.
Sir, I wanted to know your opinion on architecture academics today. Is it relevant in the current context wherein multiple disciplines have to be integrated at academic level itself? For example, marketing?
Not really. I have another presentation called MBA, called Mastering the Business of Architecture. That will do it another day. No, the architects need an MBA. And I've been sort of telling the council, and I've been talking to the Council of Architecture, saying that at least start introducing some electives in final year of the basics of what is business development, what is marketing, what is communication strategy, also fundamental financial management. Many architects become design builder contractors because they don't know, they're not taught what is finance, how to manage a firm, and so on. I really feel why in this time and age, a business module needs to be introduced into architectural education. I mean, for instance, lots needs to be done in architectural education. People are still being tasked how to draw king post trusses and queen post trusses in the first and second year. The whole syllabus needs to be completely changed, I feel. And also, I think that this whole monolithic idea of having one council of architecture who decides both the education as well as the practice is an outmoded idea. It needs to be broken up into two separate bits and also needs to be decentralized. India is a vast country. You cannot have one person sitting in Delhi deciding the fate of everybody all over the country. You need to be broken up into multiple pieces. And also the profession and the educational component needs to be separated like every other country has done. And business modules definitely need to be introduced into architectural education, at least as a elective in the 4th and final years.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sharad. So Priya has a question. She wants to ask about the present scenario of architectural criticism and discussion, the discourse that is happening in our country currently. Priya, would you want to unmute yourself and ask the question?
Yeah. Hi Naresh. It was a brilliant session as usual. Being in Bangalore, we've watched many of your sessions live. So it was another invigorating session. So my question, there were two questions actually. One was most in the relevance of architectural criticism. Like I would want to say like 70 years post-independence, it's high time that architecture of the Indian subcontinent should be defined and discussed post works of Corb and Khan. We still keep discussing them. Like how the New York Times or the Guardian have an architectural criticism column where every new building which is built in the neighborhood is discussed by an architectural critique, and then people voice their opinions. There is a high need of architectural criticism and discussion to reach the common masses in India too. And with that, a universal strategy could possibly be developed where, you know, it reaches the common masses and more people are aware and the profession could gain in itself. What do you think? Would you think something like this could be started or helped?
Yeah, definitely it should be done. But what happens in India is that, you know, criticism in India is a very dangerous thing because none of us want to criticize our friends. Even if your best friend has built a rotten building, you will not come out and say it because we all, and because of this, actually, the only place where criticism to some extent exists is in cricket and in films, right? People don't somehow want to criticize other people in India. They see criticism as a negative thing. They don't understand the difference between the two words critique and criticism.
Absolutely.
So what happens is that in India, architectural criticism is non-existent. Nobody wants to say anything bad about anybody else. And I think one of the reasons why there is so much bad taste is because nobody is calling it out and saying bad taste. So, and everybody has a vested interest in some sense not to criticize other people. So I think it's time that, you know, some of us, at least, you know, are able to now, you should also be, if you are going to be a critic, you should also be able to take criticism of what you do. No, that's important to also be have the humility to be accept that you are not a perfect this thing all the time. Many of us, you know, who are little senior in the profession now are starting to think that, you know, we should start atoning for our earlier mistakes a little bit. There's a fantastic piece in the Guardian. Many of you might like to read it, of this unusual architect from Pakistan called Yasmin Lari.
Yeah, I just
and
read.
Did you read that?
Yeah, it was very, very interesting.
Very well written piece by the person who written it also has written it very well, and which shows how you can do a critique of a profession. And Yasmin herself says now she's atoning for her past sins. So I think many of us have to do that now. I mean, many of the senior architects in India, and people take it very badly if you criticize. Even film criticism, people, if you give the bad review for a film, people get really angry. And many of the buildings in India, I think, need to be trashed badly. A lot of them, a lot of trash is being built. And we have to, I'm just waiting for that fearless person to come out
So would you feel
is
like
Apurva on the call here? Is Apurva Bose on the call?
like a body should be formed or a thing so that they write in the newspapers, or because newspapers only talk about brick and bonds and some lighting and something which is like of no use, and a whole 4-pager is wasted on that.
I know, but yeah, it's a good suggestion. We have to find a way. We have to find a way to. I'm not sure how exactly to do it, but I think people like Apurva Bose and all have started to make some attempt at writing about architecture. I think that it's some more architects, particularly the younger ones, should start taking this as a serious profession itself, and starting to do critiques rather than the word criticize, critique of what is being our built environment. I think it's an important suggestion, and let me think about it, how to actionalize it in a much more consistent way.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So we move on to the next question, which is by BL Architect, and he wants to specifically ask about how to come up with a strategy in your own practice. So BL Architect,
I didn't hear the question.
So the question is particularly about if your own current practice, how do you devise a strategy for its function? He will elaborate on the question.
Yeah.
I will just ask him to.
Go ahead.
BL Architect.
Hi, sir. Thanks for the presentation. Sorry, I have to just scroll down to my question. Yes. I was asking, moving forward, what's the strategy in practice to develop your own resources and human capital by creating a skill-based practice, which looks like something which architect Bijoy Jain has done, all the way up to architect Sagar from Total Environment?
Yeah.
Or a more multidisciplinary diversification of design services, like how Byakar's role is there in Big, KBC, WeWork, etc., or even how UN Studio's current practice format is set.
No, but I mean, you can't really do what, see, the word best practice is something that somebody else has done, right? You can't really copy a best practice. You have to come up with what I call the next practice. You have to come up with what your own idea, what is it? It has to be a reflection of what you are good at, no? At your own skill set. You have to understand what you are capable of doing and what you are capable of doing, and you have to also have the humility to admit to what you cannot do. And most architects are megalomaniacs. They think they can do anything. But if you really sit down and ask them to think about what they can really do, you don't have to admit it to anybody, but at least to yourself, some humility and introspection is required every now and then, every once a year. Like Vipassana, you should do design asana. And then sit and think about what you are good at and what you are not good at. And then fashion your strategy around that. And if your interest is more on doing what Bijoy Jain is doing in terms of craft, the promotion of craft, then you should do that. If you're interested in more what Big wants to do is to become the enfant terrible and the greatest architect the world has ever seen, using media, what I call the mediatized strategy of doing architecture, you should do that. Each architect is driven by his own character and his own this thing, no? Whatever makes him get out of bed in the morning is what you should. That's very difficult to find out, but you need introspection and time by yourself to. This is a perfect time, this pandemic time, when we're all stuck at home and not knowing what to do, is to sit and think about what you really make 2 columns. What am I good at? What am I terrible at? What do I really suck at? And figure out what is it that you're really good at and focus on that as the basis of your future practice. And for the things that you're not good at, find partners who are very good at that and create a synthesis and a collaboration model with them.
So my learning is that you're saying that strategy is a sort of USP. Your own
100%. Form always follows strategy. It does not follow any architectural firm, even the past, if you see, form has always followed that. Architects don't want to admit that they have a strategy, but the really good ones always do, because they see it as a business tactic. And there's nothing wrong if you ask me to learn from the world of business. Many architects, you ask them who is their role model, they'll tell you Steve Jobs. What is Steve Jobs? Steve Jobs is probably the greatest marketer in the world. He knew nothing about computers or design. He knew how to sell them, right? He always found other people to design them. He knew nothing about the technology. He's not a trained engineer and he's not a trained MBA. But he's a natural gift for understanding what you want, what people want. And if you understand, if you have skill like that, you should do that.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for the question. So someone has a question which is directly to your practice.
Hello, sir. The presentation was really good. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And it's a very mediocre, yet I'm very curious about this. Like, what is your strategy towards convincing a client or building a project, sir?
What do you mean? I just said all that, no?
You did, sir, but how would you like to elaborate on what is your firm, or what is it, what particular signature strategy that does it have to?
The whole point is I do not have a signature strategy. Someone, is it your name?
Yes, sir. Someone with us, sir. Yes.
So the whole point is that we do not have a signature style. We are an orchestration firm. We are like 8 or 9 practices working together. Each one has got different skill sets. We don't work all over the place. We work in 3 or 4 major sectors. We work in science and technology. We work in real estate, and then we do a lot of work with industry. So these are and many times we find that many of these 3 things come together. And we find that we are particularly good at reinventing typologies. We are particularly good at coming up doing projects in which involve a lot of background research and technical complexity. We're also pretty good at keeping hold. We are also very good at retaining our clients. Our oldest continuous client has been with us for 32 years continuously. And we know how we don't look at clients as a one-off thing. We look at them as building relationships. So we learn from each one. We learn a bit from Gensler. We learn a bit from Mr. Koolhaas. We learn from Mr. Bjarke Ingels. And we also learn all these things and synthesize them all into what is unique to India and what is unique to what we are capable of doing. That is essentially strategy. It's not a big word saying strategy is not like a box. It's a continuously shifting thing. It's a dynamic thing. You keep changing as the market changes, and as the opportunity comes along, you also learn how to play that game along with that particular opportunity.
Yes, sir. But when you have multidisciplinary work going in your firm, like how do you manage it? Is it not chaotic to handle many work at a time?
Yes, it's a very large firm, and I have a lot of partners who are very good at things that I am not good at. We are mutually, exclusive, but we are collectively totally exhaustive. We have a MECE strategy, MECE. And we know each one is strengths and weaknesses, and my strength is somebody else's weakness, and my weakness is somebody else's strength. And we know how to put that together, and it's evolved over a long time. We are a 50-year-old company, Samanvida. We're not.
Okay,
so we've learned. We've made a lot of mistakes along the way, but over time, and I'm not saying we have still not. There are new mistakes to make coming up soon after this pandemic. So let us see. And every time we make a mistake, the trick is not to repeat the same mistake twice. That's the only rule that we have as a value.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Saman. So Mahesh has a question about niche experts and how do they really need to be streamlined. Mahesh, can you elaborate on the question, please?
So Mahesh had to leave the session, so you could read out the question directly.
Okay, so Mahesh wants to ask that the scope of work for niche experts is varied and large, but the problem is one outreach, and the other is that there are several companies trying to do the same or similar stuff. Do you think there is a need to streamline these niche areas such that we have the right person for the right job?
What is the question?
So he's asking that a lot of companies are doing the same things, and maybe he wants to say that the innovation aspect is suffering in this whole thing. So is there a need to streamline these niche areas?
How would architects streamline what the clients want? No. How would architects know? How do you have? I mean, that's what I'm saying. Architects are not megalomaniacs, man. We cannot control what is going on. We can only respond to an opportunity. You know, we cannot go around saying, please streamline your requirements or whatever it is. Niche experts are niche experts. This has not yet come to India in a very large way. But abroad, there are firms like Populous, which does only stadiums. There are firms like in Atlanta, what is it called? I forgot this firm, TSA or something, which does only convention centers. There are firms who do only experience centers. There are firms that are very niche. There are guys who do only schools. There are firms like for instance, there is a firm in Delhi called, I think, Rajinder Kumar and Associates, who does only hotels. Right? 95% of their work is hotels. There is a firm in Hawaii called Wimberley, Allison Tong and Gu, which does only 5-star resorts, not even hotels. So India has still not yet hit that level of hyper specialization. But
And,
it's coming.
Correct. I think that answers Jayant Pereira's question also. He was asking what your opinion of architects being specialists rather than generalists.
So you have to be a special generalist or specialist expert. You have to be a, what I call expert generalist in certain areas. You cannot also hope to be everything to everybody, right? So you have to learn to know, first of all, what you enjoy doing, 2, what opportunities are coming your way, and 3, learn to synthesize the 2 and learn to focus on 3 or 4 large areas, maybe if you're a large firm, or 1 or 2 big areas if you're a smaller firm, and then go with the flow. That's all. You can't be everything to everyone.
And I think we'll move on to our last question, which is from Sahil. Sahil, do you want to ask the question? So,
yeah.
Sahil, yeah,
I'm here.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes.
Okay, so my question was, Instagram aside, what are the tools according to you for architects to do more marketing and publicity? What actually works? In tools, I meant like images, content that can capture potential clientele.
Yeah. But what I cannot understand is why architects, okay, this is a good ego boost, but most architects I find go around presenting their work to other architects most of the time, right? In conventions and so on and so forth. All these nice pictures of light coming in through pergolas, and every architect, they want to just present stuff like that to their own peers. I never find architects going into the and talking about their work to their future clients or to their future or to their future to other industry bodies or maybe other places. I think that's an important thing that architects should do. You can't keep saying the world doesn't know who we are, but you will not make any effort. They should find out by themselves. That's one possible way. The second thing is start writing about what you do in general media. You know, somebody else mentioned that there's no criticism, there's no critical talk about what is going on. Unless you create that opportunity, how is it going to happen? You should learn to talk about your work to a general audience and start making, not necessarily only promoting yourself, but promoting the profession of architecture as an important profession. Now you see the new Supreme Court ruling which says you don't even have to be an architect to practice architecture in India. This is what is happening because we don't have a lobby which is strong enough to put up to talk about this. I think Geeta, you have organized something now to
yes, on
2 days with Habib, right? Yeah, and one of the fundamental points there is that let us stop this patting ourselves on the back conventions. We are getting bored of them. We either have to go and talk when it is sponsored by some building material manufacturer. Even the awards of the profession are all given by building materials manufacturers. So clearly we have lost an idea of who we are by ourselves. I think we should, as an architectural practice, maybe Acedge can be the pioneer, and you start giving awards to architects who are doing good work rather than being just instead of some other architectural material company sponsoring they can sponsor it, but their name should not be on the award. The architectural body's name should be on the recognition of the award itself.
Sir, thank you for that. in the very beginning, you were mentioning that there is a need for people to be able to market themselves. So my question was more about digital platform. So what is it that captures the audience? Not particularly other architects, but a potential client pool?
I think people have not understood the power of YouTube, making short videos, explanatory films. So there are now some architects have started understanding how to do it. But even Instagram is not a static medium, right? Instagram is also a video, it's also a moving medium. Start learning to use all these tools in a consistent, but rather than saying I'll put one post on Instagram, same post on Facebook, and same post on some other platform, you have to have a strategy for that also. That's why I made a point saying that what is that strategy? That's a business secret, right? In the sense that you have to have your own strategy. I'm not going to tell you what I do in an open forum. If you want to come and meet me one-on-one, I'm happy to tell you. And if you go to a consultant, they'll probably charge you a bomb for it, how to do it.
Right.
Right. But there is a digital strategy too. You have to have a strategy for that too. It's not just enough to have a design strategy. You also have to have a communication strategy, is the point that I made right in the beginning.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you so much.
All right, Sahib.
Geeta, over to you.
I think that brings us to the end of this session. Thank you, Naresh, for the thought-provoking talk on strategy shapes design intent. What a perfect way to come to a conclusion to a talk series that brought in diverse dimensions in the architectural discourse. Your presentation took us through multiple parts of strategizing about ideas for design manifestation, whether the strategies involve marketing or branding, out-of-the-box thought experiments in the very functioning of offices, ideas that are born out of striving to improve lifestyles and protect ecologies. All of them brought to us an understanding of how design thinking and business thinking go hand in hand and contribute to promoting new ideas that could in turn shape individuals, communities, and cities for the future. I'd like to once again express our gratitude to all the speakers in the Architects Connect talk series, Architect Sameep Padora, Architect Vami Koticha, for bringing in thought-provoking insights on sensitive design practices through technology, Nilab for his enthralling talk on high-rises and global trends and innovations, Architect Ravi Sarangan this morning for sharing ingredients to inclusive office environments, and of course you, Naresh, for the stimulating discourse on design intent and strategy. I'd like to also, Naresh, you brought up this session on 11th by Architect Habib Khan. He'll be in conversation with Architect Srinivas Murthy with a focus specifically on this Supreme Court judgment and the Architects Act, and let's see where that's going to take us in the future. So anybody who wants to sign in for that, just go on to our acedge.in and sign up for that talk as well. It's going to be about an hour and a half or 2 hours long of just answering questions really. He's not going to, maybe a 5-10 minute overview, but it's going to be asked questions that have been asked by many of those who've enrolled. Once again, I'd like to thank Sengobain for making this series possible and enabling the support towards this relief fund that we are directing towards construction workers and daily wage laborers. Last but not the least, a big thank you to all of you who joined us in this talk series. We will keep on striving to bring exciting new initiatives your way so that learning never stops and the discourse is kept alive even in these challenging times. I see this as a forerunner in the series, and I'm looking forward to a lot more happening along the way. Like Naresh and Sahil were just talking about strategy on social marketing. Do follow us on Facebook and Instagram for updates on new courses, webinars, talks, and many more things. Until then, stay safe, everyone. And yeah.
Thank you, Geeta from Sri Lanka, for organizing this and inviting me to take part. Excellent program. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jayanta. Thanks so much. Thanks, Naresh. Thank you all once
Bye.
Hello. Hello. Thank you, Nareshji. Thank you, Geeta ma'am, for this session. It was very nice. Thank you.
Thanks. Look forward to seeing many of you on Saturday as well. Bye.
Thank you.